So you want to know why it's not a particularly very good idea about taking advice from disgraced politicians? Is because the majority of their rhetoric seems to almost come from the fact that whatever they truly believed in, or what they professed to the public that they believed in, and when they come around once again and try to make themselves known in the spotlight through their appeal and, more in particular, who they're appealing to, you end up with people like Liz Truss. Probably not nearly as bad. Well, no, actually, no. Lee Anderson's far worse. But Liz Truss, I want people to understand something very, very important for future generations when they look back on this. The reason why Liz Truss became Prime Minister in the first place is because Boris Johnson had to resign in disgrace following not so much a coup in terms of amount of people that had to resign over accusations against the chief whip, Chris Pincher, but basically Michael Gove. I don't think Michael Gove resigned. I know Rishi Sunak resigned. A lot of people resigned, and Boris Johnson had no choice but to serve orders to quit. And then he got hired by the Daily Mail. But we'll get back to the Daily Mail in a second. Is that now there had to be there was a position for the Prime Minister, so they had to vote amongst the Conservative Party, which this is sort of thing that a lot of people, including myself, it's completely rubbed us the wrong way, because because what essentially happened is that a very small percent of the population of the country now had to vote on who the next Prime Minister was. Let me rephrase that, however. Not elect, rather choose from among their own party, meaning that there was no chance for Labour to get a word in, or the Lib Dems, or the Green Party, or any of the independents. It was all specifically down to the same group of people that had been running the country and running it into the ground since 2010. They were now going to have to choose amongst themselves again for the next Prime Minister. And following about 6 weeks worth of news and rumours, mostly rumours to be honest, because again, when you're holding an election with such a small amount of people, is that you have to grasp onto any amount of information as you can. But the three main people that were in the running were Penny Mordaunt, Rishi Sunak, and Liz Truss. And you could look through the archives, but the Daily Mail openly stated that they were backing Liz Truss. Then Penny Mordaunt and Kemi Badenoch were out of the picture, and then so was Sunak, because Liz Truss won the majority. What happened, ladies and gentlemen, was one of the most chaotic and one of the most almost spiraling decays of a politician you could imagine. A cabbage outlasted Liz Truss. And Liz Truss, by the way, Liz Truss is not even the shortest serving Prime Minister in history, because I'm pretty sure that honour goes to Sir Lord Douglas Hume, I believe, circa 1963, I believe, was when Hume was made Prime Minister. And I think he only served for like 1 month, I believe. I think it was only because I think it was either a stand-in or it was while there was some other issues going on. I'll have to double check my facts about this. However, Liz Truss only lasted roughly 10 days more than Douglas Hume. And well, to actually understand how bad things became, first of all, Therese Coffey, the former food secretary, was made the deputy prime minister. And anyone who ever, trust me, Therese Coffey, she is going to get her day as well, because she needs to be held up to the light in terms of just the amount of nonsense and the amount of jaw-dropping rigmarole that comes out of her mouth, because I've never seen such a politician that she is probably the most one of the most deluded politicians I've ever seen, because they are incredibly out of touch. And that might be a theme throughout this video, is that when a politician is out of touch, then fine well immediately, that's it. Whatever whatever they promised they were ever going to do for us is completely out the window. Especially when, again, Theresa Coffey says stuff like, can you make people work on only like £3.78 an hour? And I don't even think this was even aimed towards those under the age of 18 during minimum wage. And then basically, blah, blah, blah. Truss's chancellor of the chancellor was Kwasi Kwarteng, who, and I know there was a Labour politician who was fired because of a number of remarks she made about Kwasi Kwarteng. Although I did agree with her about one thing, is that Kwasi was only an imitation chancellor, because he got the sack basically after 30 days of being elected as chancellor. And I'll have to double check my figures about whether or not there's been any chancellor that's lasted in less time than Kwasi. And it's his handling of the economy spiraled so completely out of control. The Bank of England itself had to step in, otherwise we would have fallen, never mind recession, we would have fallen into downright bankruptcy 2 years ago. So yeah, if you, I'll probably have to cover a lot more of these things, because trust me, the entire history of Liz Truss's tenure as Prime Minister needs to be documented, studied about exactly what not to do. And I know fine well that schools are sort of prevented about clear distinctions in this way, because it creates a conflict of interest and a issue resolving bias, especially when it comes to politics and how it's like taught in schools. I mean, I could go on about what I was told in school about, you know, the setting up of the NHS. Basically, a lot of politics involving the UK immediately after the Second World War and just before the assassination of Kennedy. So, again, what goes into that, I'll have to make known next time. However, we've now got to fall back on just sort of what Liz Truss has been up to just less than 2 years since she was also disgraced and had to resign as Prime Minister. And bear in mind, again, the Daily Mail, they backed her. And bear in mind, the Daily Mail is a corporation that doesn't even pay its tax. So any semblance of opinion regarding them is even less valid than the Daily Star. I'm pretty sure the Daily Star pays more in tax than the Daily Mail does. Get your heads around that one. Because, well, just take a look at this. So apparently Liz Truss is performing in something called a Cpac, and it's the Cpac revolution, as she calls it. Taking back our parties is like a big... And of course, the amount of colours are in the background. You know what this screams of? Of Donald Trump. And it's sort of almost like the style and the angle that a lot of the mid to hard right English politicians are sort of going in, because, well, yeah, exactly. Look, you've either got the American flags around here, but it almost, I don't know if you could say if it's a sense of patriotism or if this is just form of like US legislation, because I'm pretty sure this is meant to be in the US. But what isn't part of the legislation, however, is the fact that half this room is empty. Because I know and I think this must have been the point where Liz Truss must have knew that things were not going to work, because who is going to take the opinions of a disgraced Prime Minister who took no accountability, who took no responsibility, is completely unfazed, is still absolutely just walking about, and the fact that she somehow thinks that she's in the right about all this? And that's even the thing about Johnson as well, and like even David Cameron. Well, I don't know. Maybe David Cameron probably doesn't fall into this. Theresa May, I suppose Theresa May must have a little bit of self what's the word I'm looking for? Self-awareness, and that. But again, if you want my honest opinion, not so. Well, we're not really talking about Johnson. Johnson's like, Truss is probably the least self-aware. I mean, I've been alive for 26 years, and I went through the politician, like the prime ministers of my time were Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Theresa May, Johnson, Truss, and Sunak. Truss, by a very long way, is the least self-aware. She is less self-aware than Boris Johnson. Wrap your heads around that one. And even if you want it, and here's the thing, as time's gone on, I'm now starting to believe that Rishi Sunak might possibly be even worse, because as insane as it was with Truss, it was still rather short. But if you know what I mean, if that's the best thing I can say for Liz Truss, then that's the only thing I can say. So let's see what Truss has got in store for when people, because people catch on to this sort of thing, is that what ground does Truss, how does Truss rationalize that she's done a good job or that she's worth listening to? You tell me. Because again, you're gonna have to tell me, because she would probably be relying on people like me and people like you to vote for her if she ever does try to get back into Parliament, just like David Cameron.
Thank you so much. And it's fantastic to be here at Cpac.
Okay, so from what also, I must give credit to Politics Joe for this video, and make sure to give Politics Joe a follow as well, because if you want to catch up on a lot of the very current affairs news regarding the UK, there's no real bias whatsoever with Politics Joe, and something that a lot of people should take notice of. So let's go.
So many true conservatives. And boy, are you needed now. Because the reality is that the West has been run by the left for too long.
Okay, you know what, I could say that literally, well, actually, no, I was almost about to give her the benefit of the doubt, but then I realized, no, that's not fair. It's not fair to give her any. It's not fair to just say that, maybe she doesn't, because what I want Truss to understand, Truss, the Conservatives in the UK have been in power since 2010. They've been in power for 14 years, and bear in mind, in 2023, half of Paris was up in flames because Emmanuel Macron wanted to raise the state pension requirements from being 62 to 64. And the people revolted so heavily, and they were basically they were baying for blood is what was going on during last year in Paris. So I think Truss may want to consider rewording her question, because even in Eastern Europe, there's been a very large wave of very hard right supporters. You even noticed this because I think there was a football match between either Albania and possibly Georgia, and they couldn't show a large part of the crowd because there were a lot of flags being waved, which were in support of a very hard right organization. True story, by the way. I'm not making this up. It was what it was, and bear in mind as well, other things that have happened not too recently is that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine 2 years to this very day, and it doesn't strike me this is a very hard left ruling of Europe, if you ask me. And there's a lot more I could get into, but that's just Truss does not look convinced herself that she's saying this.
And we've seen that it's been a complete disaster. On the streets of our big cities, we have people protesting in favour of terrorism. Now, I thought that companies in the free market were meant to be about giving people jobs, giving people opportunities, making money, making profits.
Yeah, and by the way, before she starts blaming the left wings for this, I want to remind everybody that Suella Braverman, former Home Secretary, who was given unbridled amounts of experiences and opportunities in her past, decided to celebrate this charitable gesture of goodwill by burning every single bridge to prevent any minorities from the poorest members of society to those who are from the poorest members of the rest of the world who are migrating over to Britain, by making sure that they get absolutely nothing into it. So how do you rationalise that, Liz?
Creating wealth for our country. But no, we've got a new kind of economics now in the West. It's called wokenomics.
Just this, okay, this, first of all, the silence is overwhelmingly loud, because you don't want to know what silence means, ladies and gentlemen. It means that nobody is responding. Nobody is deciding to make any sort of statement to this. And Liz Truss she's trying to say, oh, it's the woke people. It's people who, who respect the law. It's black people. It's Asian people. It's, it's Catholics. It's Jews. It's Muslims. It's people who think this is unfair, what we're doing. It's, if we do a good job, and you know what? It means we're doing a good job. But because if you disagree with us, it means you're this. It means you're that. It means you're everything else. I'm sorry, but this is like, you know what's really sad about this? Like, really, really sad, is that they think this is somehow the right thing to do. They think that just saying it's this, that, and the other, they think that that's what the right answer is. They think that rationalizing their poor decisions means it's somebody else's fault. And you know what? Forget being self-aware, forget being delusional, but Liz Truss, like Boris Johnson, because I think Liz Truss and Boris Johnson are very, very alike, because two of them lack two very crucial skills that you need in life. Not necessarily in politics, but it is a big part. But in general, accountability and responsibility. And as anybody who knows as well as I do that Johnson was the man who severely overestimated his authority and severely underestimated his quarry, even before the pandemic began. And Liz Truss ran into was basically given the position, and she completely screwed it up, and here we are now. She just acts as though she takes no response. God almighty, it's everybody else's fault but their own, and that I know. Listen, there was a point in my life where that shit would really, really piss me off, and it does, yes. But that's the thing as well, is that I'm almost thinking about going silent as well, because I'm not surprised. And that's terrible. It's terrible not to be surprised at this, because people need to get angry at these sorts of things. People need to kick against the pricks like Liz Truss, because how do you rationalize whether it's woke or not? What is your, if Truss, and like I said before, it simply is not working, because you know what? If what Liz Truss thought worked, she would still be Prime Minister to this day. Think about that. If she thinks that she's doing a good job, then you know what? Why is she still not the Prime Minister? Why is Kwasi Kwarteng still not the Chancellor? Why is Therese Coffey still not the Deputy Prime Minister?
It's actually about DEI and ESG and all those other three-letter acronyms that mean less opportunities for people and less future for our nation. There are too many Conservatives who have gone along with some of these left-wing ideas.
Actually, now, you know what? I could do you guys one better. I've got Liz Truss. I could give you a four-lettered acronym for Liz Truss's campaign. It's called Truss's Whimsical Attraction Trust. Yeah, twat. Yeah, that should work pretty well. I would love to see if she did. No, I don't think she'd do it.
In Britain, we call them chinos. Conservatives in name only. I think in America you call them rhinos. Republicans in name only. But it's the same tendency. It's people who think, I want to be popular. I don't want to upset people. I don't want to look like a mean person. I want to attend nice dinner parties in London or Washington, D.C. I want my friends to like me. I don't want to cause trouble. The United Kingdom and the United States are exceptional. We are great nations.
She was on about, saying about being popular, but she was almost immediately willing to kiss the arses of people by saying America is great and Great Britain is great. You know what? The thing about being popular, ladies and gentlemen, is actually something of a very... I think people have sort of got a little bit of the wrong idea about being popular means that if you are popular, it means you are right. No, ladies and gentlemen, it couldn't be any further from the truth. Because in my honest opinion, and this is something that, again, doing social media for 6 years means that you get to understand that it might not necessarily be about what you're talking about. It's about who is talking about it. It's about raising the alarm on certain things that you're passionate about and letting it come through. It comes through in droves because people are more attracted towards people who are true to what they say, who aren't hypocrites. I'm trying to avoid things like aren't, because it should be more about what you are as opposed to what you are not. For example, there are lots of people who are popular because they're not racist, because they're not sexist, they're not homophobic. But the problem is that we've sort of grown as a society to be accustomed to accepting that should be like the baseline, that you shouldn't be any of those things. But we haven't necessarily accepted a baseline as to what you should be. Now, you may say immediately that that's kind of a little bit counterintuitive because people expect people to be kind to each other. We expect to be fair. We expect to do the right thing. But we're not particularly very surprised or impressed when people do the right thing. That's the sort of thing that, because logically it should be a no-brainer that we should be doing the right things and we should be not doing, really bad things and stuff like that. Which brings me on to, well, who is like Liz Truss really? And this is like a problem that Liz Truss, that, and again, a lot of politicians when it comes to like public image seem to don't seem to quite to comprehend, is the fact that she wants to be. It's not just about being seen and never heard of. You've got to be heard of and seen. You know what? People larp on about Sir Keir Starmer about when he talks about his father, but you know what? I see it that Keir Starmer loved his father, and he was very, very impressed by by what he did. And you know what? I bring up my dad quite a lot because you know what? Because of his hard work, his character. What he's taught me and about what I've learned about him just from using my eyes. And you know what? I don't think there's anything wrong with that because it's a relatable thing. You know what? Keir Starmer had parents. I've got parents. We all have parents. Like, it's the sort of thing you just want to humble yourself a little bit. Truss thinks that, again, humble is not the word Truss has seemed to have really grasped yet. And bear in mind, Truss is, 51, I believe? I'm going to say maybe 49, just to be a bit more generous. But, yeah, that's the thing as well. You just try and again, don't do things just because you think it's going to make you look good. You should do good and nice things because they are the good and nice things to do. You know what? Not everything you need to do needs to be documented or a news conference is to be held about it. You should do just what you think is right because you know it's the right thing to do. And I'm not convinced Truss said the UK is great or America is great because she really believes it. I think she just says it because she thinks it's just going to get a small round of applause from a very small crowd that she can't even fill because of all the reasons I mentioned. This is the problem, ladies and gentlemen, when you don't take accountability and responsibility, because why should you be taking advice from somebody who, well, for all the other reasons, I should say.
And I refuse to have our history talked down. And I refuse to have our values talked down. We need to stand up for those values.
By the way, can I just... Okay, so... if there's one thing I will say possibly about this, ladies and gentlemen, is that I absolutely understand, and there are a lot of things to be said about people who try to censor history, but you know what? They're just as struggling with reality as much as well as Liz Truss is. But what people need to understand is that, you know what? There are some things that in our history that we may not be very proud of. But when I say our history, I mean, if I'm talking about the things that we've done on this earth. Why should I feel guilty about a completely different person from a completely different point of history who have done things that I had no say or control of whatsoever? So, unfortunately, again, I understand probably why Liz Truss would want to say this, but the problem is that it's not new or revolutionary, and even those who just sit down and think about it for 5 minutes will know immediately the same answer. But how does this fit into what she's talking about? We'll wait and see. About how she thinks, oh yeah, that's right, how she thinks that this is just a ploy by the left wing and somehow they've been in power since the beginning of history.
And we need to stand up for them every day.
Okay, well, how are you going to do that?
I put forward a range of policies, and those policies got support. They got support from our party members, from our base. And the policies were cutting taxes, cutting the size of government, and reining in the administrative state. Making sure our board...
It's a false economy. Small government means small government spending, so less spent on the police, less spent on public services, and you know what? They say so much about crime and about how the rise of anti-Semitism happens, but you know what? With fewer police and fewer resources to actually combat these sorts of levels of hostility and crime, then is it any surprise why they go up? You know what I mean?
Borders were secure, and we were deporting illegal immigrants. Making sure
to the people clapping in the background, I just want to say is that, you know what, deporting criminals who've come here illegally, you know, that's one thing and all that. But again, why exactly, you know, if it was as nearly as half as successful as Truss is claiming to be, then why is she still not Prime Minister? And again, it's one of those, I don't know if it's just because of the crowd she's appealing to and all that, is sort of just apathetic about the whole thing, which might be the other issue as well. When Truss decided to go all the way to the US to do this, it does raise a very particular question about what context does the Americans have towards the political situation that's happening in the UK right now. And yet again, that's the thing I'm talking about. Why is Truss having to appeal to Americans about this, about how good she's done, when, again, actual sources from the UK would suggest otherwise?
People could start a family by building more houses and having cheaper energy. I wanted us to get fracking in the United Kingdom. You know that fracking has lowered energy bills here, and it's made America less dependent on powers. And that's what I wanted to do in the UK. And what I also wanted to do was get rid of all the EU laws off our statute books.
And she killed it. She could say immediately, if she could have made a passionate appeal about fracking, but then again, tried to just cut all ties from the EU again. Now, this is something that's been going on. People demanding that we remove ourselves from the Court of European Rights. And yeah, there are lots of people that I know who are, again, very apathetic about the Tories anyway, because they think that they could just arbitrarily decide to do this in just a plot to deport migrants all the way to Rwanda. But that's a different story entirely. But again, the situations, again, that are happening in the UK are like so drastic. We're not even we're barely 3 minutes into this. And what I'm getting from so much of this speech is that if Truss, this would suggest again why, among many things, why Truss was already disliked by a large portion of the population. Something that most people would have hard to justify as to why. Because again, think of all the by-elections since that the Conservatives have lost to Labour, and that whether Truss really likes it or not, if they were working half as well as she claims they were, then why is she still not Prime Minister? You answer that, Liz Truss. If what you were doing was so good and it made sense, why are you still not Prime Minister? Because a lot of people are just going to be asking the exact same thing, possibly even in this audience.
You may think that we voted for Brexit back in 2016, and I'm sure you're going to...
You did, I didn't.
...be surprised to hear that the vast majority of those EU laws are still on our statute books. It's a bit like getting divorced and still living in the same house as your ex-husband. I face the most almighty backlash for those Conservative policies that I tried to put in place. From the usual suspects in the media, from the usual suspects in the corporate world, but also from people that were meant to work for the government.
One or two comments I needed about that. First of all, Truss seems to be under the impression that if you work for the government, then therefore you are going to basically sleep every night with a picture of the Prime Minister over your on your bedroom wall, or that you're going to again. I'm sorry, Liz Truss, but you know what? People who work in the public sector, people who work in schools, they don't start every single morning by dancing under a Christmas tree, praying to the Queen or to the King. Truss doesn't Truss. You know what? Truss. Listen. When people when people say that you can't bring up the subject of politics within the public sector, when you're trying to suppress people for what they truly believe, it means they're going to hold on to their beliefs even stronger. And one thing I reckon Truss is probably not going to mention is the backlash she received from the public. The people who were not given a say about who they could actually vote for to become the next Prime Minister. Something that Truss got the luxury of, and she still screwed it up.
The Office of Budget Responsibility, the Bank of England, these organisations sought to undermine the policies. Even the IMF intervened. And even President Biden intervened to have a go at my policies. And we essentially need a bigger...
Say whatever you like about President Biden, but even Biden would have looked over the pond and thought to himself that something is not quite right and something very, very strange is going on. I wonder if, that's exactly what Kwasi Kwarteng told Biden before Kwasi was forced to fly back over from Washington just to get the "thank you for giving me the sack" letter. Because that's how it happened.
In order to be able to deliver. And I think we have got to challenge the institutions themselves. We've got to challenge the system itself. And we've got to be prepared to take that on as Conservatives. And of course, we need Republicans in the Senate, and we need Republicans in the House of Representatives. But we need Republicans who are prepared to fight. We need Republicans who aren't going to cave in to the establishment.
Call this biased or what, ladies and gentlemen, because, again, this may be a bit more of a personal thing, but there are actual conflicts happening right now between Israel and Hamas, between Ukraine and Russia, from ships being targeted across Iran and across there's enough conflict going on in the world, and that's why if I was in Truss's one second. Hello. Yeah, okay, okay, yeah. Okay, about 20 minutes? Alright, okay, see you in a bit. Bye-bye. Sorry about that. Okay, so as I was saying, if I was in Truss's position, I would be doing everything I can to avoid using words like conflict, fight, and stuff like that, because it evokes images of violence. And violence is, again, this is just me talking, but violence is something I want to heavily suppress in whenever I give a speech, because we should be learning how to work together, not fight each other. All Truss is concerned with is fighting people that she thinks are tearing this place down and who are the ones in charge. Truss is like, this is like a very, very backwards and very, very jarring idea, that she thinks that being too conservative is exactly what it. But no, if you were conservative and you're fighting, you wouldn't want to change anything away. The whole point of conservatism is to keep things more or less as they are. It's about preserving the status quo as much as possible. The rich get rich, the poor always pay. That's Truss's idea of the status quo, if ever I've seen one.
We need Republicans who are prepared to take on this difficult task.
And again, when I say poor always pay, but again, Truss would somehow think that they are woke because they think that millionaires becoming even richer off the backs of the starving and poorest members of society. She thinks that the minority are the ones, well, the poorest are the ones to blame for all of this, despite the fact that they make up a larger percent of the population than Truss could possibly ever comprehend. For, what was it Jeremy Corbyn said? For the many, not the few? Yeah, that's the one. Something that Truss probably not only fundamentally disagrees with, but she is willing to do, basically move heaven and earth to say that that is blasphemous and possibly disloyalty and treacherism.
Even if it's unpopular, even if they're criticised, even if they don't get invited to any dinner parties. That is what we need.
Considering what happened to Downing Street a number of years ago, I wouldn't want to be invited to her party. In any sense of the word. Also, even if she's unpopular, aka unpopular because they know they're not going to be impacted by any of this, it's just going to affect, 80% of the population. Which is a really big thing you have to consider, ladies and gentlemen, is that any decisions they're going to make would ultimately affect the poorest, the working class, more than she would ever be affected in her lifetime.
We have our borders out of control, with illegal immigrants able to enter our countries freely.
And while all this is going on, is when the Conservatives were in power, and still are in power. This never was a problem whenever Labour was in power. So, well, like she said before, small government spending. Which means that, again, small government means small government spending. So if there was larger spending, then perhaps this wouldn't be an issue anyway. But again, remember, this was even going on while she was Prime Minister too. So what are you doing blaming Labour for, or blaming the left for all this?
We have a growing tax burden and a growing size of government, as well as some of the most powerful...
Oh, she wants to talk about tax. Oh, well, what about the fact that the Daily Mail don't pay their tax? Or what about that the former Chancellor didn't pay his tax? I can't quite remember what his name was. The Right Honourable... You know who I'm talking about. Mid-40s. I think he was from the Middle East, and he didn't pay his tax either. And you know what? He got the sack because of it. I don't understand why... You know what, I'm wrapping this up, but I don't understand. What is Truss trying to prove with this?
Awful bureaucratic states that we've ever seen. And our energy bills are going up because of the Green New Deal or net zero, even though China is building coal-fired power stations at a record rate. What I want to talk most of all about today is the fact that the very basis of Western
China is
civilization.
also a communist state, Truss, so what's your solution to it? Communism, but we just don't call it communism?
Is being undermined. The values, the Anglo-American values that we hold dear, that were encapsulated in Magna Carta, in the Bill of Rights, in the American Constitution. They're being questioned and undermined. Our history is being challenged. Even our biology is being challenged. Could you imagine 10 years ago that we'd be talking about what a woman is and what a man is and having a serious argument about it? It's incredible. And yet, every issue the left win, they push it even more.
Well, why wouldn't they? You know what I mean? That's why. I don't know why Truss thinks that, they're Okay, but you know what? If you really want to have an argument about transgenderism, let me tell you something right now, ladies and gentlemen. When I was 17 years old and I had the opportunity to actually write an essay regarding, my A-levels when I was doing English literature, it was actually to speak, by and large, a lot about issues about transgenderism. I was very, very interested. In fact, I was very, very intrigued, and I was very, very keen to actually have discussions about what is a man and what is a woman, and why do people think that they are born in the wrong bodies, or what exactly is it? Is it an issue of? Is it a thing about empowerment? Is it about because they choose to be like this? Because again, one thing you have to really, and I emphasize this quite a lot, is that people didn't get their say when they were born, whether or not they had whether they were male or female, or what even their names were. And it's surprising as well that Truss didn't make a thing about people getting all hussy about what names they were born with, and they could just change their names and stuff like that. Despite the fact that it's been legal in this country for many, many years to have your name legally changed. Some of them for very legal, particular legal reasons than others. Meanwhile, if we want to go back to the issue of transgenderism for just one moment as well, is that one thing that I think Truss undermines deliberately through this is the fact that people have that choice. People have that freedom. And you know what? That's the thing as well. People can't hop on about freedom and immediately say, we can't have people who are wanting to do this, that, and the other. Because you know what? Who are you to suddenly start turning around and saying that people cannot openly express who they are or who they want to be? You know what? Love is to share. Love is not to be close-minded, to be bigoted, to be sexist, to be homophobic, to be someone who lords their power over everybody else. People should have the right to be happy. That is about as fundamental a human right as it could possibly get. And Truss seems to think that that's a bad thing, which I think just about says what her utter contentment for the public really is. You know what? I could hop on again about her logic, and I could hop on about, the history of the fact that how bad it all went for her. But one thing that is also becoming clear is that she doesn't care about any of that, because, and I've said this before, Liz Truss is a long list of people who are actively malicious. I think they know deep down what they are saying and what they're doing is bad, but you know what? Liz Truss couldn't give a shit, because as long as she can get away with it, that is all that matters. And that's why she probably still gets invited to conferences like this, even to half-empty ones. But yeah, it's a huge problem. I think it's a huge problem where people can just openly say these things, and they think that they won't have any repercussions for the things they say. When, you know what? When it comes down to transgenderism, and when it comes down to Liz Truss, and this is something I wrote as well, ladies and gentlemen, if it doesn't impact you, then what on earth are you so upset about? Why are you so mad? Because you know what? She speaks about if this was 10 years ago. I reckon in 10 years in the future, we'll be looking back on this and we're saying that Liz Truss probably would have been thrown into prison for stuff like this, for hate speech. Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm almost in the position where I'm almost wanting to label this as hate speech. What do you guys think?
They push it to even more extremes. And meanwhile, we've seen President Biden asleep at the wheel in the White House.
That doesn't make any sense, Truss.
Because that is the way that we will ensure that Republicans are in power as well as being in office.
I don't know, that made even less sense, Truss.
And it's
I think what
ultimately...
Truss is trying to say is that if you are in power, then be in power, be in control, get a grip. You're the one in charge. Things that I think Liz Truss is openly refusing to admit because somebody could just turn around and say that Liz Truss was the one in charge and, oh, forget it.
Conservatives being in power, that is what is going to save the West. We will not save the West without that. It's fantastic to be here and get the injection, the fresh injection of conservative energy.
No, it's kissing your arse, Truss.
We need it. We need it very much in Europe. We need it very much in the United Kingdom. And let me tell you, we have 10 years to save the West. Let's get to it now. Thank you. Thank you.
I reckon you've got about 10 years, Truss, before, again, we'll look back on this and realising, how did we not think about arresting people like Truss sooner?
Thank you.
Truss just sits there looking... Oh. So I'm just... What a disaster, ladies and gentlemen. I have absolutely... I suppose if there's like... I suppose the only other thing I can say to end this off, if there was anything worth saying to end this entirely, is the fact that why on earth did Liz Truss want to do this? I don't think... I mean, literally, I could go through the comments right now, and I'll just say right now that I think it's pretty obvious that actually quite a lot of people don't agree with what she said. Sorry, I wiped off £30 billion from the bank balance, crushed the economy, pushed up mortgage rates, and will give back my super inflated pension for 6 weeks' work. Liz Truss didn't say. To any Americans watching, on behalf of the UK, I'd like to apologise for the worst Prime Minister we've ever had, even worse than Johnson, probably worse than... worse than Johnson, worse than Cameron, worse than... oh, God, come on, think. Worse than Johnson... It was someone from the 30s or something like that. Possibly even worse than Lord North, who lost the American colonies. 25 seconds in and she's already confused about the government of the UK is... Yeah, and she complains about Biden falling asleep. According to Bloomberg, Truss was the worst Prime Minister that... Again, nobody believes her. That's the point I'm trying to say. Nobody from the UK believed her. Nobody from the US believes her. Nobody across the world believes the fountains of shit that come out of her mouth. Because, and I'm just going to say this right now, just before we go, if Truss was talking sense and she wasn't talking shit and the things she said actually made sense and the things that she did made sense and if all of that was true, she still would have been Prime Minister. She still would have been the person in charge. Except no, she isn't. So what are you doing complaining to us about it? Okay, so that's just about all I've got to say, and I would be a very, very happy man if I never have to hear from Liz Truss ever again, because, like I said, she talks complete and utter crap, and I think, you know what? Rudeness is not having fun. Rudeness is having having fun at somebody else's expense. And I hope to God that Liz Truss's parents or children are not watching this, because they would not be very proud of their daughter / their mother. Thank you and good night.